everybody, today we're going to talk about solving proportions, and so this goes with the same learning goal as the last video, but this time we're going to be working on the I can solve proportions part of the learning goal. So just as a reminder, a proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. And there are three ways that we're going to talk about solving proportions today. And basically, you should try to be able to do all three of them, and then you can kind of pick and choose whichever one you like the best or whichever one works best for a situation. The first way that we can solve proportions is we can use unit rate to solve proportions. And so in this example, if we know that postcards cost $2.45 for 5 cards, we want to figure out how much will it cost for 13 cards. Well, one way of doing that is figuring out how much it costs for 1 card, and then using that unit rate to figure out the cost for 13 cards. So this is just like what we were doing in the video with unit rates. So if I wrote a rate of $2.45 for 5 cards, and I want to figure out, well, what is the cost for 1 card? That would be the unit rate. So in order to do that, I want to know the cost for 1 card, or the cost per card. So I'm going to divide both of these by 5 so that I can figure out the cost of 1. So $2.45 divided by 5 would be 49 cents per card. So if I know that each card costs 49 cents, I can then just take 13 times 0.49, and that will give me the cost of the 13 cards. So that would be $6.37, and I can check and make sure it should be more than $2.45. It should be more than twice $2.45, which would be about $5. So $6.37 does seem to make sense for the situation. So that is one way to solve a proportion. Change what you know, the initial rate, to a unit rate, and then use that to figure out the cost or whatever of however many you want. We can also use mental math to solve proportions. So if I'm looking at this proportion, I know that these two ratios have to be equal to each other. The first ratio is 3 to 8. The second ratio is something to 24. And I can see, well, 8 is a factor of 24. I can multiply 8 by 3 to get 24. So then I should just multiply the top number by 3. We could show this, or they'll show this in the book, that, oh, I multiplied that by 3. So I should do the same thing up here and multiply that by 3. So 3 times 3 would be 9. So I can say that B needs to be equal to 9. So the ratio 3 to 8 would be equal to the ratio of 9 to 24.
The free response question for today is underwear face.
And the last way that I can that we're going to talk about that I can solve proportions is to use cross products. And remember, we talked about cross products in the last video. Cross products are what we get when we multiply diagonally. And if I have two equal ratios, I know that those cross products have to be equal to one another. So we are told right there, there's an equal sign in the middle, which means that these do form a proportion and they have to be equal to each other. So if I multiply diagonally that way and that way, I will get two things that have to be equal to each other, and I can use the equation that I'm going to get when I do that to solve for x. So when I multiply this way, I'm going to do 25 times x, or x times 25, which is going to give me 25x. And I know that whatever that product is has to be equal to what I get when I multiply across the other way when I do 38 times 15. 38 times 15 is 570. So now I just have a simple multiplication equation that I can solve and figure out what x has to be in order for these to be two equal ratios. Because I'm multiplying 25 times x, in order to solve this equation, I'm going to divide both sides by 25. So I get x equals 22.8. So you can see that proportion would have been hard to solve using mental math because there's no simple number, no whole number that I can multiply across. One's not a factor of the other. So it was a lot easier to use cross products to solve that proportion. Now, here's a game that we have from Lure of Labyrinth. And I've been talking about for quite a while that these trays, the foods on the trays, form proportions. So you can look at any two numbers on the tray and that will form an equivalent ratio if you're comparing the same foods on another tray. So let's look at the spiky hamburger on that tray and drumstick, and then also spiky hamburger and drumstick on this tray. And if I look, I can form a ratio 5:2 from the Yeti's tray, and I can perform a ratio of 50:20 from the Golem's tray. And you can pretty easily see, you can use mental math in this case to see that those two ratios are equivalent to each other. I would need to multiply both the numerator and denominator by 10. And so those are equivalent. So I can use that information to set up proportions where one of the numbers is missing and solve for the other ones. So I'm going to do one, and then I'd like you to try and see if you can fill in all the other numbers. So after I'm done with this one, you can pause the video and see if you can fill in all of these, and then I'll put up the answer key and you can see if you got the same thing. Okay, so for example, I can see right here that I have a slime and a drumstick, and then on this tray, the slime is missing, but I have the drumstick. So I can figure out what that is equal to. So I'm going to just set up a proportion that looks just like that. So x over 20 has to be equal to 30 over 6. Now, I'm looking at that, I'm saying, well, 26 is not a factor of 20, so I'm probably not going to use mental math. I'm going to go ahead and use a cross product here. You don't have to, but that's what I'm going to do. So I am going to multiply diagonally, and I will get 6x equals 600. So I can pretty easily see 6 times what equals 600. X has to equal 100. So that means, if I erase this, that this amount right here has to be 100. So why don't you go ahead and try and figure out some or all of the numbers that would go in the other missing spots on the tray. All right, so here's the answer key for that. We can see that we did find the 100 correctly, and hopefully you were able to fill in the numbers in the other missing spots correctly. And now here is your free response and multiple choice questions, and have a great day when you're done with those. Bye.